Hi, I'm James Westhorpe, and today I'm going to be speaking to you guys about my internship experience over in the US and how you can go about getting that experience yourself. If you have any questions at all, feel free to get in touch, but I should cover most of what we need in this video. So first of all, for the background, I went over for the summer semester, so early June, late May to the end of August to Arkansas State University, who are in the Sun Belt Conference. They're a Division I college over in the USA. So we're in a small town called Jonesboro in Arkansas, which is around about an hour, hour and a half from Memphis, Tennessee. So day to day, roughly, we'd get up around 4:30 in the morning. I'd be working mainly with football. I also did a little bit with basketball as well, men's basketball specifically. So 4:30 a.m. wake up. We'd get to the college around 5 and we'd start setting up for the lifting in the morning and also the team run. So from 5 till 6, we're setting up, making snacks, getting the gym ready. Then from 6 till 7, we would have the team run. Depending on what they were doing that day, it might be running, aerobic work, anaerobic work. We might be doing speed agility specific work, some jumps, depending on where we were at in that program. Then we would go in, we'd split the groups up because we don't have a massive gym space available. So we'd go 2 groups, and then other guys who were not available due to whatever reason, maybe it was class, maybe they were injured, they would come back at a later time. So from 7 till 8, we would have the first lifting group, and then from 8 till 9, we would have the second lifting group. After 9 o'clock, we would then, as a staff, go over, have breakfast together, and then we would come back. And then usually I would go over to men's basketball and help out with their lift there. And then I would head back over, and we'd have a little bit of spare time, roughly from 11:30 till 1 o'clock, 1:15, where we would probably lift ourselves. And then after that, we would have the football team freshman group come through, and we would lift them, and then we would run them after that until about 3:30. Now, depending on the day, we would usually be done around about 3:30, 4 o'clock, or we could have like an upskilling session on a Monday night, for example, where we would sit in with the football team and listen to our Director of Athletic Performance, Coach Patrick Ivey, about upskilling within mental performance. So we would look at staying focused, what happens when decisions don't go your way, how do you deal with it, dealing with, team things like fighting within the group. So there was a bunch of psychological things that we really went over and covered in depth, which was really, really valuable for myself. So after that, we did have weekends here and there where we got to travel. Being the summer period, it's pre-season for most teams, so we don't have to be there every weekend, or we don't have to be traveling with any teams. So we would get it off most of the time. So this was a great way to really get to know coaches and other interns better, and it was also a chance to do a little bit of sightseeing in various cities that were around the area, and also even potentially visit other college campuses if you get the opportunity to do so. Okay, so my first bit of advice for trying to get an internship in the US is that you have to get clear on what you want to do while you're there. So do you want to work with American football? Do you want to work with men's or women's basketball? Or do you want to work with Olympic sports? Because a lot of the time, these teams have got separate strength and conditioning staff. So depending on the school you go to, if they're really big within, say, a Power 5 conference, you might have American football as a standalone staff. You might have men's and women's basketball as a standalone staff. And you might have Olympic sports again separately as a standalone staff. So you need to know which sports you want to work with, and you also need to know at what level you want to work with them. So if you're looking to go to the really big schools in, say, a Power 5 conference, then yes, you might only find yourself working with one sport. But if you're looking, say, at a lower Division I level college, you'll have the opportunity to potentially work with more sports if they have those sports available. Then next up, you could also look at working with a Division II college or even Division III. So these colleges will typically have less staff. They might even have only 1 or 2 staff that work there, and they're going to look at covering all the sports. So they probably need more help, and you may get more hands-on work with them here and hands-on experience. So that's my advice. Do you want to work at a bigger school and potentially be exposed to better athletes, be exposed to more coaches, and maybe have better networking opportunities depending where you go? Or do you want to work a little bit lower and get your hands dirty and work with more athletes and potentially less staff? So that's something you do have to weigh up. Now, just be aware, as an intern, you may have to do a lot of jobs that you don't necessarily want to do. So, you're going to have to do cleaning, you're going to have to be scrubbing bars, you're going to have to be making sandwiches, or you're going to have to be doing all these things that the coaches who are working there full time have been there and done. So now that's your turn to come in and do those little jobs that need to be done, but not everybody necessarily wants to do them. So in this part, we're going to talk about getting an interview and then getting accepted to go over to intern in the US. So my first part that I want to chat about is where to look to apply. So 2 key websites that I use are the cscca.org. So they're the College Strength and Conditioning Coaches Association over in the USA. So they often list a lot of internships available and a lot of jobs available within the college system over there. Then the next part is strengthscoop.com. So they are actually a really big website as well, specifically for football more so, but they also list a lot of internships that are available, whether it be for Olympic sports or for football itself. So they're 2 key websites that you should check out if you're looking. The other thing that I recommend doing is emailing as many coaches as you possibly can. So, send cover letters, send resumes, look on their websites. So websites have what's called a staff directory. If you go to that staff directory, it's going to list all the college strength and conditioning coaches that work at that specific college. So you should check that out, and it often gives you the contact details. So it'll have phone numbers, it'll have emails listed there. So get in contact with not necessarily the director, because they will often be very busy and not be able to reply to everybody, but you should at least get in contact with an assistant, and they should help you in the right direction. So there are 2 key things that you can do to give your chances a better opportunity. The next thing I would say is, when you contact people, ask them for advice and tell them what you can do for them if you want to intern with them. So look at the coaches that you may have followed in the past, look at coaches for what they're doing and what specific area that you're interested in. So if you're, say, interested in rate of force development or force plate work, look at who is really good with force plates or rate of force development, and who's a leading researcher or who's highly regarded in training for that specific area. So that's another bit of advice I'll give you. Get in contact with them. You can Skype with them, have a chat. That way they get to know you a little bit better, and then on top of that, it helps you give them an understanding of what you can do for them. Because remember, internships are not necessarily about what they're going to give you, it's about how you can help them in their program. The next thing I'm going to chat about is finding accommodation. So the 2 key things that I looked for were price, obviously, and location. So ideally, because I didn't have access to transport at the time, I thought it would be better to be closer to the campus or be on campus if I could. So I looked at both Airbnb, and I also looked at staying on campus. So luckily enough, I was able to end up staying with another intern who was able to drive me each morning. But getting back to that, so looking at price, if you're going to stay on campus, it's going to cost you a fair bit of money. So I was quoted about $22 a night, that's US dollars, to stay on campus for 83 nights. So that adds up. It was almost about $2,000 US. Then, as opposed to Airbnb, where I was staying for about $1,000 for the whole 3 months that I was there. So just keep in mind that your location is important, but also the cost is important, because costs really do start to add up, especially when you add in flights and then you add in food each week that you want to pay for, and then you add in things that you're going to buy, because obviously when you're overseas in the US, things are not as expensive as they are in Australia, so you're going to be buying other things as well, so keep that in mind. The next thing I want to chat to you guys about is flights. So obviously to get to the US you need to fly there, because it's going to be a long time by boat. My flights overall, because I had a lot of connecting flights, were around about $2,500, and I also bought them quite late, which didn't help with the price. So in terms of flights, you want to make sure that you leave enough time for layovers, especially in Los Angeles. There was a time there where you may get taken into customs for extra questioning. I experienced that. So I don't recommend leaving a short time period between flights. So I had about 3.5 hours, which was around about perfect. So if you want to go shorter, you can, but just be aware you may be taken in for extra questioning. The TSA are very hot on foreign people coming into the country at the moment. In terms of other connecting flights, I was LA to Houston and then Houston to Memphis. Layover times there, a little bit shorter is fine, so probably an hour and a half, and you should get away with it perfect. Coming back, I went and split it up a little bit further, so you have to keep in mind, do you want to do some extra traveling or not? If you do, again, the costs are going to add up, so you need to make sure that with flights that you have an idea of how long your layovers are going to be, where you're going, how much it's going to cost, and how long you're going to stay in each place. So again, to break up the long trip from Memphis back to Melbourne, I went from Memphis to San Antonio, spent a day or two there, and then I went from San Antonio to LA, then LA back home, which was a really good way to break it up and help with the jet lag. So the next bit is travel insurance. I do recommend getting travel insurance when you go over. I was able to go through one cover. I got their comprehensive insurance for about $419, which was a really good price for the whole trip that I was away. That covered me for unlimited hospital cover and emergency hospital cover as well. So there are also other covers available, but you'll just have to research that yourself. But I do recommend one cover because it was the cheapest for me and the best value at the same time. So one cover is definitely what I recommend. So this part, I'm going to talk to you guys about visas. So visas obviously are something you're going to need if you go overseas. To get an internship, my internship and the time I was in the US was less than 90 days. So that gave me the opportunity to simply get a visa waiver. So the visa waiver is about $20. You apply for it online and you get noticed within a couple of days at the longest. So for me, that was quite an easy process. I didn't have to sit through any interviews or anything like that. If you do need to get a visa to go over, I recommend getting in contact with the college because they will probably have to sponsor you. So depending on their requirements, you may need a J visa or a B visa, so I'd recommend looking those up as well. The next part I want to talk about is making sure that you have everything documented that you're going over there with. So for example, when I went over there, I got taken in for further questioning about what I was doing in the country. So I recommend you print off everything, so your email correspondence with your supervisor, your email correspondence with whoever's hosting you for accommodation, if you've got a hire car or anything, just make sure you print it all off, keep it in a folder and take it with you in your carry-on luggage, because you're going to need to show proof of what you're doing there, how long you're going to be there for. So make sure that you've got flights booked to come home if you're on a visa waiver. If you're on another visa, that might be a different story. So they're going to ask you questions like, what are you doing here? Are you getting paid? How long are you here for? Who are you seeing? Who are you spending time with? And they're going to go into depth with their questions about the athletes you're working with, the college you're at. So make sure that you have proof of everything you're doing there, because you don't want to get there and then they say, we don't believe you, you're going back home. Daily living expenses are also an important thing we need to take into consideration. So for me, I was eating on and surviving quite well on probably $75 a week roughly, that's US. I also did get a meal each day when I was at the college, so It made it a little bit easier for me in that regard. So I took a 28 degrees MasterCard. There was no international transaction fees, and it's 55 days interest free, so you don't have to over worry about paying it off. So if you're going to make any big purchases while you're there, I recommend using that. I also took a Travelex card, which is a pre-loaded money card. You can withdraw cash with that card from an ATM overseas if you need to, or you can just swipe the card and use it. There are, again, no transaction fees on that one, so that's a really handy way to spend money over there. In terms of other living expenses, I didn't have to pay bills or anything like that because I was living in an Airbnb and that was all included in the cost. If you're living elsewhere, say on campus or in like a hostel or something like that, that's something you may want to take into consideration and look into and ask about. If you're driving, obviously fuel is going to be a factor. If you're with someone else driving, or if you're hiring a bike, there's plenty of ways to get around. So even Uber is another way you can do it, but the price of Uber is going to build up quite quickly because it is quite expensive when you're there. So make sure that you have daily living expenses under control, and always take into consideration that you'll need probably more money than you think. The last little point I would like to talk about is getting a SIM card for your phone, because obviously you're going to need a phone while you're there. So my Australian phone, I had an iPhone 7 Plus. I simply took out the Australian SIM that I had, and when I got over there, I was able to buy a SIM with AT&T. I got $40 a month. It was pretty straightforward. They set it all up for me. Unlimited calls and texts. Data was capped at 8 gigabytes, and that was high-speed data. Then once you get past that, it's unlimited but at a slower speed. So really good value from AT&T. If you want to buy a SIM card over here before you get there, you can do that, but it is going to be quite expensive, and you'll probably have to renew your whole phone number each time. So you might have a different number when you're over there. So keep in mind with that. So AT&T, that's who I recommend. Just on top of all of this, remember, this is just what I did. I'm not getting endorsed from anyone about this. That's all I recommend. They were the best prices for me and where I was going. So I do recommend that you do your own research, find out who has the best prices for you wherever you're headed. So because different parts of the country are going to have different prices, different carriers, different everything. So keep in mind that this is what I did. I'm not being endorsed for any of it. In terms of the experience I gained over there, I learned a lot in terms of the psychology of coaching, actually being an athlete and understanding how it is for them in sports that I have never competed in, and what they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis in competition and training. So I found that extremely valuable. I found working with different athletes and communicating differently, having to change my skills from one athlete to another, especially when you're in big groups, like when you have 100 plus guys running around, who you're communicating with, how you're communicating with them. I found all of that extremely valuable, and it's something that I can bring back and keep with me forever throughout my coaching career. I also found the hands-on aspect, so the actual training. I learned a bit in regards to methods that I had learned about before but never implemented myself. So I did find that very valuable, and just how they went about it. This is definitely something you do if you're looking for a little bit of career experience. Like if you're at around about my level in strength and conditioning, like you haven't been in elite sport and you would like to taste that next level with what would be elite athletes in most of their sports, because they do start training from quite a young age over there. So they are very elite when they get to that college level. So it is a great opportunity to meet new people. It's a great opportunity to learn a different culture and a different way of living, even though the US can be quite similar to Australia in certain ways. I do highly recommend it. It's probably one of the best experiences I've had for both personal and career development. So definitely do it if you're on the fence about it. If you're not totally sold on doing it, I'd say you need to get really clear with yourself and ask yourself the questions like, why am I doing this? Like, knowing your why is really important. If you're not really invested in strength and conditioning, I probably wouldn't do it, because there's other things you can do that are probably going to give you a better benefit. So again, also be aware, it's not going to get you an elite job when you come back, because there's a lot of people who have done, what I've done and what I'm talking about right now. So, you got to network with people, you got to build relationships, you've got to do all that. And I definitely recommend that doing this, it's something you can just add to the resume, and it's going to really help build your experience and show that, hey, you're willing to travel off your own back and you really want to get better. So again, if you're not really invested in it, don't do it. But if it's definitely something you're keen to do, I would highly recommend it. So guys, if you do have any questions, feel free to comment below. You can email me, jwesthorpe.sc@gmail.com. So please do get in contact. I would love to answer any questions that you have that were not covered in this video. Please like the video, share the video to anyone who's interested in going. Subscribe to my channel, do all that stuff. And I hope to see you guys next time. I'm James Westhorpe. See you later.